70% of the sales profession right now is completely irrelevant. There's a fine line between manipulation and influence. The Grant Cardones of the world and the Wolf of Wall Streets of the world, those guys are pieces of shit. If you think sales is about convincing anybody of anything, I think you're doing it wrong.
Cluely or AI SDRs, artisans, they're really going to wipe out a large number of SDRs from the market.
2010 to 2022 was the golden age of sales. If you got into sales after 2010, sorry, hasn't been that hard. I have to get on the phone with a 22-year-old SDR who doesn't know shit from shit.
One of the toughest things that everybody tells me in sales is to hire the right guy. Every 10 guys you hire, one's going to work out.
You don't hire on skills. You hire on work ethic. You hire on passion. You hire on drive. I interviewed Jack Welch. I stood up in front of about 1,000 people and I asked them, how do you instill your passion on somebody else when you hire them? He told me I was an idiot. He said, you can't. You got to hire him.
One suggestion that you think is they can't neglect.
Give a shit. It's the one thing that AI can't do.
Welcome to Edbound with Kinner. John, it's such a pleasure to have you with us today. I'm really looking forward to learn so much from you.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Now, John, you've had such an amazing career. I mean, you're one of the most well-known sales training professional, expert, ninja. I mean, there are so many words. You run a company, you do millions of dollars in revenue there, and you've taken a startup to acquisition, right? Beginning to acquisition. Now, with so much packed in, how do you introduce yourself, in a room full of entrepreneurs or investors?
I don't know. I don't think I'm that important. I'm just more of just somebody who's out there trying to fight this fight just like everybody else. I don't ever consider myself a trainer, never have, never will. I'm more of a sales rep who happens to train. I think when I got into this industry, I didn't want to. Well, sales, I wanted to. I kind of fell into it just like everybody else. But then when I had the opportunity to train, I didn't really want to, because most of my experience with trainers was, they're either failed sales professionals or professional presenters. Right. And we've all known the trainer that, within the first 10 minutes of listening to that trainer, you can tell they've never sold a damn thing in their life. Or if they did, it was 20, 30 years ago back in my day, and they're wearing a suit that's 3 sizes too big and doing a role play that would never happen in real world. So I never really wanted to be that. But the company that I had actually taken this training, it was called Barrows, and that was to help my first company sell off to Staples. I ran sales and marketing, and I took this training when I was a kid, basically, and I loved it so much. And then when we sold to Staples, I had the opportunity, Basho came, said, hey, do you want to be a trainer? And again, my first response was absolutely not. No, I have no interest in being a trainer. And they're like, why not? I'm like, I don't like trainers, right? But then my mom has always been a career counselor. So from the age of 12, I've had a Myers-Briggs and, DISC profile and all that fun stuff. And I remember calling her up and asking her, Mom, I got this weird opportunity to be, a sales trainer. I'm like, I don't know if I want to do it or not, whatever. And, what are your thoughts? And she started laughing and she goes, John Michael, she's the only one who calls me John Michael, but she goes, I never wanted to tell you, what to do in your career. She goes, but if there's anybody I felt would be a great communicator, trainer, it's you. And I found that odd, right? So I remember for Basho, I had to do a training, and I had never done a training for formal training before as part of the interview process. And so I went down to local bookstore, Barnes and Noble, and I picked up a Training for Dummies, and I read it, and I put together my little presentation. And it was funny because when you open up the book, there's 10 characteristics of how you're cut out to be a trainer. And when I read it, I was like, holy shit. I'm like, every one of these is spot on with my personality, with what I like to do, with what I'm passionate about. And then when I made the connection that, because when after my acquisition, after Staples bought my first company, it was an IT services company, they fired me. Well, they offered me another position, but they fired me. And because I just wasn't a fit for corporate. And I was kind of at an existential crisis because I was like, man, I had my head down for 7 years and I was an IT sales guy. And so I'm like, ew, is that what I'm supposed to be? I'm like, am I an IT sales guy? I'm like, I don't even like computers. I don't even like this stuff. And my wife was the one who helped me figure this out. And she goes, okay, well, let's look back at your career and figure out why were you one of the best reps at every one of the companies that you worked for, right? So, DeWalt Power Tools, that was my first job. Why was I one of the best reps there in the region? Well, it's because I love DeWalt Power Tools. They were cool, right? So for me, it wasn't hard to sell them. And then I went to Xerox, and it's not that I liked copiers. It's just I believed that Xerox was the best copier company in the industry at the time. And then my company, Thrive Networks, I didn't care about the tech. I believed that the people were, that we were the best in the industry. And so when I realized it had nothing to do with what I sold, it had everything to do with that I believed in what I sold. That changed my perspective. And that's why I think you have to be in sales. I think in order to be truly successful in sales, you have to genuinely believe in what you're selling. If you don't, then you're just a douchebag sales rep trying to get a commission check. But when you believe, then it's about that transfer of enthusiasm. And so now
Wow.
with that as a background, I then had the opportunity to work at Basho. And the Basho training had made such an impact on my career and our growth that I believed in it, genuinely believed in it. And so then when I kind of made the connection that I could now sell sales training that I believed in, but still be a seller, not a trainer, because that's what Basho's model was. Like, you couldn't be just a trainer. You had to be a sales rep first. You had to sell and then you could train. And to me, that was, that was the perfect match for me. And so when I walk into a room of investors, and I'm just nothing more than a guy out there trying to do my best to stay relevant and add as much value to the clients and individuals as I can, and evolve with this crazy world that we're all in right now, because it's moving pretty fast.
Wow. No, that's such a profound intro and background to why you chose to be a, in sales trainer. But I find it super rare to have people. I mean, I've hired possibly about 150 sales guys in the last 10 years. And I think I would possibly not point that even three of them really were doing it because they love the product really.
Yeah.
It's rare. And I hear you. I think it's been what, 30, 25, 30 years now. Is that right? Like that's how
Yeah, I'm
long you
coming up
just,
on 50. I'll be in, I think I started doing training in like when I was like 28, something like that. But I've been in sales since I got out of schools. Yeah. And I think that's the problem, right? I think sales, the perception of sales is far different in my opinion than the reality of sales. I think, I always tell people, if you think sales is about convincing anybody of anything, I think you're doing it wrong. Sales isn't about convincing anybody of anything. It's about helping people solve problems or achieve goals. And if that's not what you're doing, then you're just, again, the douchebag sales rep just looking for a commission check. And unfortunately, the sleazy part of sales is a lot easier to gravitate towards, because quite frankly, it's easier to make money by manipulating people. You know what I mean? And people are easily
yeah,
manipulated. And so that to me is, there's a fine line between manipulation and influence. And I think great sales reps influence and they believe in what they sell. Bad sales reps manipulate. Like when I hear somebody saying, "Oh, he can sell ice to Eskimos," I'm like, that's probably one of the worst sales reps I've ever met in my life. Like the Grant Cardones of the world and the Wolf of Wall Streets of the world. Those guys are pieces of shit. Like they literally are pieces of
yeah.
shit, and they teach everything that's wrong about this profession. And so, I'm just trying to, make the connection to people of that this is a great profession when done right, but it's one of the worst when done wrong.
Yeah. And what do you think has kind of stayed as a quintessential central thread or capability that's helped people? I mean, the core lessons in GTM and sales, if we were to find the common thread that stayed like it for the last 25, 30 years since you've been doing it.
I mean, solving problems. You know what I mean? Like if the problem isn't big enough, the impact of that problem isn't big enough, then we shouldn't be having this conversation. You know what I mean? I think the best sales
Are you
reps.
saying are you saying vitamin versus painkillers? The common. I mean, are
Yeah.
you advocating?
I think that you can sell vitamins, right? But I mean, I think it depends on the economy. At this point, vitamins are kind of hard to sell, no question about it. The painkillers are
Mhm.
definitely because people are in pain. But back in 2010 to 2020, vitamins were people were buying shitloads of vitamins. You know what I mean? So I think it really depends on the market where you meet people. If somebody doesn't have the money to buy the vitamins, but they're in pain and they need the painkiller, like you sell them the fucking painkiller. You know what I mean? Or you go find the people that have the money to buy the vitamins.
Yeah.
So it's
Wow.
square peg round hole, right? I think situational awareness is critical for, if you want to call it a common thread, it's if you're not selling something that solves a real problem in a market that doesn't need things that aren't, frivolous and extra, go find something else to sell. You know what I mean? Or go find a market that has the need for it and has the, resources to invest in it. Maybe that's not in your territory or something like that. It's in different regions. So that's why I think companies need to be more agile than ever right now. So I don't know. I mean, the common threads are, belief in what you have, belief in what you sell. Here's one. I think that to me, it really has nothing to do, quite frankly, with what you sell. It has everything to do with how you sell. I mean,
Mm,
if you think that, and this is where engineering founders get it wrong, in my opinion. Engineering founders always think the product is the best, right? Oh, our features are the best, and it just sells itself. Like I can't tell you how many companies I've heard say, "Oh, we don't need sales rep because our product is that good." Guess like Slack and Tableau and all these all these different companies that say, "Oh, we don't need sales rep." Well, guess Dropbox, Box, right? Guess what? I've trained Dropbox, Slack, Tableau. You know what I mean? I've trained all those
yeah, yeah,
companies because
yeah,
eventually you need to figure out how to sell it. And I think as long as you take the perception of sales out of the equation and understand that sales is nothing more than helping people solve problems or achieve goals, then you start to realize that everybody is sales. Everything is sales. And if you as an organization are not centralized around that, you're going to fail. Period. Because right now, what your product or service does, that's table stakes. Like if you can't show up to the table with your solution that does what it says it does and is relevant to the marketplace, then you're not even invited to the table. So with that as the baseline, then it literally has nothing to do because you want to be in a feature function conversation. That's not selling. That's you want a spreadsheet, me going through check boxes and this has this and this has this. That's not sales. That's Amazon. Good luck. You know what I mean? And that's what I think has gotten really challenging over the years is I think we have, look, when it comes to sales, art and science, right? I've always said that I think sales should be more of a science than an art because the science lays the foundation for the
yeah.
art form, right? That structure, that process. The problem is we have way over indexed the science. And so, I position 2010 to 2022, especially in tech sales, as the golden age of sales. Because if you got into tech sales after 2010, sorry, hasn't been that hard. It really hasn't. Like we've been able to get away with blasting out template cadences to anybody, right? Setting up disco calls with anybody with a pulse, asking dumbass Bant questions, droning through irrelevant demos, and letting our SE do the majority of the work and then offering a massive discount. Like that's been sales for the past 10 years. And so we have
Yeah,
this whole
yeah.
generation of sales professionals who think order taking is effectively selling, who thinks filling out a Bant chart or a medic chart is doing their job. And that's not even close to it, right? Like it's helping people make decisions and helping uncover problems and be curious and all that stuff. And so, I think we've done a disservice to this generation and now we've turned them into robots and now they're all getting replaced by robots. It's no question in my mind that I'd say 60 to 70% of the sales profession right now is completely irrelevant.
Wow. So you truly think, and that's what you're hinting towards, that Cluely or AI SDRs, artisans, they're really going to wipe out a large number of SDRs from the market,
No,
right?
well, yes, and it's 80-20 across the board and pick a profession. I don't give a shit. We were just talking about doctors beforehand. I was
Yeah.
so we were just talking before. My daughter has had some really bad, intestinal GI issues, right? She's 14
Yes.
years old and it's been really stressful and it feels like it came out of nowhere, right? So I created a custom GPT. I took all her blood work. I said, act as a GI specialist. And, and I recorded all the conversations with all the doctors and I took every piece of advice and I put it in there and I started asking questions to it. I said, tell me more about this, whatever, right? And so when I would go to the doctor, so we went to a nutritionist, right? And I went in and I asked the GPT, hey, print out a 2-page document that helps update a nutritionist
A
specifically,
nutritionist. Yeah.
right? With what they need to know versus what a GI specialist would need to know, right? And by the way, I had my daughter
Wow.
like document all of her food, like what she ate, and then we had a scale of 1 to 10, which was after she ate, 1 being fine, 10, I have to go to the hospital. Where are you? Right. So we documented that whole thing. So I put that all in there too. Right. So we printed out a 2-page document for this nutritionist. I then gave it to her when we walked in the door and I was like, hey, let's get rid of this. Hey, tell me what you're, so what have you been, what's the problem? You ask a 14-year-old girl, what's the problem? My stomach hurts. She's not going to give you any insight. So let's cut the shit with this. Hey, so tell me
Yeah.
what's been going on, stupid conversation. So I handed her this 2-page thing. And I said, all right, like, here's where we are. And she looked at it. She's like, wow, this is incredible. I go, I know, cool. So now I get 10 questions for you, right? I really am curious about this. And I started asking her these questions because she's the expert, right? I'm not going to trust ChatGPT for the answer. I'm going to trust it to help me
Yeah.
ideate and come up with answers. So I started asking her questions. 30 to 40 minutes in, she talked in circles for 30 to 45 minutes. Literally talked in circles. There was a bunch of maybes and you could and possiblies and this and all that
Yeah.
other shit, right? And I
She'll
stopped
get
her and
beaten by AI. She'll
so
not be there for long. Yeah.
well, this is my point, right? So I then had to interrupt her and say, I'm sorry, like I'm actually more confused now than I was walking in here. I was hoping that somebody with your experience could help guide us and give us some concrete thing. Are we going to get to that? And she kept talking in circles. And I said, all right, cool. Thank you for your time. We'll be in touch, right? I look back at that. It cost me $500, right? My deductible is pretty high. So it cost me $500 for that meeting. It took 3 hours out of my life, and it took 2 weeks to schedule. Now, let's apply
Oh,
that to sales. I have to get on the phone with a 22-year-old SDR who doesn't know shit from a business acumen standpoint, who's going to give me some little piece of shit pitch, maybe ask me some BANT questions. Then, if I'm interested in continuing this conversation, I have to wait probably a week or so to talk to an AE who's going to ask me the same dumb questions and maybe give me a little bit more value, but not really. Then I have to wait another week for an SE to get on a call who's probably going to give me the value that I want because they're the ones who know the details, but they're probably going to also have to ask me the same damn questions that the AE did. Okay, so now I got a 3-week process that I have to talk to 3 different people to get limited value. Or I can go into ChatGPT and say, okay, tell me about this company. What do I need to know? How
yeah.
does it compare, right? So it's not the SDR. It's not the AE. It's all of us. It's doctors. It's accountants.
Mm,
Look, the top 20% are going to thrive across the board. That
yeah.
SDR who can use AI to extract information, intent data, insights, all that other stuff, build a kind of a map for that business and strategies and figure out different, things that they can add value to. But then and even have AI write the fucking email, fine. But then before it hits send, they look at all that information. They learn about all that information. They make the relevant connections and they tell that real story of like holy shit value. That SDR is going to
Yeah.
be never going to be replaced. But well, I won't say never, but it's going to be a lot longer for that SDR to be replaced.
Yeah, I think it makes so much of sense. So, what you are suggesting, and I'm building sort of a playbook in my head for the best SDR, and I mean, how we could power our own SDRs with intent, content, the
Mm-hmm.
summarization of who are you talking to, and we've been running some enrichment AI agents where even before you get into a call, it kind
Yep.
of runs through the entire profile. You have signals and you don't have to waste their time. I mean, a call that would take 90 minutes or 120 minutes can be crunched into 30 because
Yep.
you're talking to the point, to the pain point and how this benefits this guy, right? I mean, we've
Yep.
had 2 of those calls today, like
Yep.
literally for our AI product, right? But I think what you are suggesting is that these are imperative, and if the SDRs, anybody basically in the whole
Mm-hmm.
sales chain is not powering themselves, is going to be left behind. How
Without
far do
question.
you see? How long can they survive without implementing these, or has the time window already passed?
I think the time's here, man. And everybody talks about these AI tools as if they're going to replace sales reps, like the cadence tools and the automated and all that other stuff. And I don't care about any of the tools that are empowering sales rep, quite frankly. The question is more, and it's starting to be more obvious, is when is the client going to wake up? When is the
When is
client
the
going to wake up? The customer. We've
yeah?
all heard, for instance, like, oh, by the time somebody comes to us, they're already 60 to 70% through the sales process, right? Like, and that
Mm,
statistic has been way overused for so long, and people used it to apply to anything, and it's not true. Like, that statistic was very directly relevant to people coming inbound. Like somebody who had identified a problem,
yeah,
had done their homework,
yeah.
and said, I'm interested. That's the 60 to 70%, right? And that used to be the inbound. Outbound was like, well, let me educate you on this, that type of thing. Now that 60 to 70%, 80% can even be done with an outbound in the sense that and when I say outbound, I look at outbound now as a marketing function. I don't look at it as a sales function at all. I don't
Absolutely.
look at an email, a cold call. I don't look at any of that as sales. I look at that as an impression point that leads to somebody to be interested in something, to learn something more about whatever it is, and then timing it with intent and all that other stuff. So if say I get some message or some email or some LinkedIn post or whatever it is, and I'm interested in having this conversation, and you find a way to schedule it, like the call, yeah, sure, let's schedule a call next week. 5 minutes before that phone call, I can go, tell me about this business, tell me about what I need to know, what questions should I be asking? And so now if sales reps are not showing up with value, right? It's not that the sales rep isn't relevant. It's the non-value oriented sales rep that's not relevant. We used to be able to tolerate it as a society because we just
Mm,
accepted that there was young reps or anything, right? Like lawyers, you accepted the fact that you had $100 lawyer, that did a bunch of grunt work. So you didn't have to pay the $500 lawyer, but that it was going to take about a few weeks for that $100 lawyer to gather the information to give it to the $500 lawyer. So you weren't spending $500 for that lawyer, right? Well, now I can just ask the questions and get up to speed so that the $500 lawyer, I can be super
yeah.
specific with their time and go from there. So that to me it's here. And the people that don't recognize that, I think are already irrelevant. And so, I know for me, I'm already irrelevant in the sense that delivering content, I mean, are you kidding me right now? I, and don't get me wrong, I still do it. I still think there's high value in it and the engagement. But at the end of the day, I train 30 people, either face to face or online or whatever it is. You learn a lot different than I do. Then compared to
Yeah.
all these, I do my best with neurolinguistic programming and doing some visual, auditory, and kinesthetics to make sure everybody's engaged in my training. And I try to understand disc profile. So I'm a high D and I want to make sure I slow down. But inevitably, when I'm training 30 people, I'm not connecting with half the crowd just
Yeah.
because my style, right? Now, AI knows exactly how you learn. It knows exactly how I learn. It knows exactly how somebody else has learned. So it can tailor the learning to me. So now, don't get me wrong, like a keynote and motivational stuff and like hands-on learning and application stuff, I think those are still human components. But the one-way delivery of content, in the consumption of content, hey, it's hard for me to look at 2 years out, a year out, and say, yeah, this is still relevant. Me standing in front of 30 people and teaching them how to send an email is still relevant. Like, are you shitting me right now? And it's the same thing
Yeah.
for reps. Like, you think you're still relevant right now when you're hammering out generic cadences and making generic phone calls with elevator pitches and asking BANT questions? Like, you honestly think that's relevant? Good luck.
Yeah, I mean that's what we're going through, right? I personally feel online courses are going to disappear, the way, the shape, and the sizes they come in, and video focus is going to be replaced by custom learning buddies. I don't
Yeah.
know if you've seen Grok has. So when you're going to try Grok and what we
Yep.
were discussing, they have a companion mode, and even in the free tier, and you've got to try the companions that they have, and they came out with this companion called Annie, who's a virtual girlfriend, and I hope they come out with a virtual guru or a trainer or somebody, because the first
Mhm.
one they launched was Annie, right? I mean, demand. You'll be blown away by the focus she has on being a
Yeah.
girlfriend. I
Yep.
mean,
Well,
and I think
that's
we're going
scary
to
and
see
sad,
that.
but yeah. I mean,
It is.
yeah,
It's just shocking. But you do see the brilliance as a creator, as a technologist. You do see the brilliance of what's possible. And
yeah.
obviously, you could, like they say, I mean, you could do good with the nuclear energy, or you could make bombs, right? I mean, it's that's what we're going to see.
We're gonna find
Yeah,
out. Yeah.
coming back to what you've seen succeed in terms of your GTM playbooks for SaaS companies now, specifically B. I know you've trained people at Salesforce, LinkedIn, Microsoft. I mean, some of the largest organizations. But
Hmm.
let's say AI is leveling the play field. You could use tech now and have capabilities that only the Fortune 500 had access to,
Hmm.
and any size of company could use that. So in today's time, how do you go and suggest a playbook to, let's say, a mid-sized company trying to grow their revenue faster?
I mean, I think it's all the foundational stuff, the science, structural stuff to get right because most people don't, right? The fundamentals, I think we've gotten so far away from fundamentals that we kind of skip them to get to the outcome, and then the outcome isn't there, so that we wonder why. And so I think it's, for instance, starts with getting really tight on your ideal customer profile and knowing that you're not at something for everyone, right? Like you go after very specific accounts with very specific criteria that are more than just industry size and number of locations, right? Like,
Hmm.
you look at their tech stack, you look at the stage of the business they're at, you look at, who do they sell to? So you get so nuanced on your ideal customer profile and so clear on the value that you bring to them. So now you have that list, and then and then you do the intent data, then you do your LinkedIn save searches and that type of stuff to follow and track those people and engage with those people, right? And then you bubble up the true intent, not just because somebody downloaded a stupid white paper, but because they're really searching for and they've been engaging with. And then you reach out to them with, very tailored content, very personalized content, whether, hopefully, a sales rep can be part of that as an SDR because they'll learn along the way, right? And then, you engage with them. Then you do the prep where, all that information. Now, the danger, for instance, you said about the meeting prep stuff, right? Where you can click a button, it gives me a whole dossier on everything I need to know about this
Yeah,
business.
yeah.
This goes back to my concern about, automation versus augmentation, because and the search engine versus the answer engine, that by giving the rep the answer of like, okay, here's what the company does and whatever it is, and just one big thing, most reps are going to skip the learning phase of that, right? They're going to take that and they're like, cool, now I know. It's like, no, you don't. First of all, AI is not accurate, period.
Like, I don't care what anybody says. It pulls off the internet. Its number one source is Reddit. Like, if you don't think that answer is bullshit, like if you don't question that answer, then you're wrong, right? So to me, like, I create GPTs to prep, but it's not to push a button. Here's the whole thing. It's, okay, John, who do you want to prep for? Here's the company name. Here's the company website, right? Okay, cool. Let's learn a little about the industry here. Here's some macro trends that are going on. Here's some trends that are impacting their business that you could say. Like, do you want to, and I forced it to say, do you want to know anything else about the industry before you move on to the next step? Like, and by the way, here's like 3 questions you might be interested in learning about related to the industry. Okay, cool. Now let's talk about the company. Now, how do they make money? Da, 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 da. Okay, great. So here's who's their ICP. Here's their company. Do you want to learn anything more about the company before we go to the next step? Here's 3 questions you might be interested in learning about the company before you move to the next stage. Cool. Learn. So it brings you through it stage by stage. So you're learning with it. You're not just getting the answer from it. Because business acumen, if there's one thing that I would double down on if I was an organization right now with my team, it'd be business acumen. Teach them business. Sit down, have your CFO sit in on a weekly basis and talk to them about finance. Have your CEO come in and just do like, hey, this is how I look at things from a CEO standpoint. Have your your procurement person come in and talk about why they do certain things, whatever it is. Like, we have all the resources in all our own companies that we sell to. Why not leverage them? So right now, my GTM playbook is a collaborative playbook that basically turns your sales org into a sales lab, where you get together on a regular basis, because the top-down decision-making right now in AI is a joke. Any company any leadership out there that thinks they're going to be able to identify the problem, okay, then go out and evaluate 2 to 3, 4, 5 vendors that can solve that problem, then go through the evaluation process, make a decision on that, and then implement that, and then train and adopt, who are 9 to 12 months out from any implementation of anything. Okay. This is why the MIT study just came out that said 95% of corporate AI things are like failed, right? Because can you honestly look at me and tell me what the world's going to look like in 9 to 12 months? Like, I have no fucking idea. I don't know what's going to look like tomorrow. So that top-down approach is just asinine. So what you do is you take your existing, and quite frankly, also, there's an argument right now to rip and replace, to literally like flush your whole GTM people and everything, just throw it all away and start AI native with AI native reps and AI native tech, right? I don't think that's the answer. I don't think we're there yet. The transition phase is use your existing resources to elevate the conversation and find different solutions. So this is what I recommend clients. Once a week, ideally, throw 2 hours on everybody's calendar, Friday afternoon, pizza and beer. And it's almost like a hackathon. Like, you know how engineers have hackathons, right? I think you should do a sales hackathon. Pick any aspect of the GTM approach, right? Whether it's prepping for meetings, intent, updating CRM, whatever it is. Break up the teams into somebody from SDR, some AE, a marketer, an engineer, an SE, and then you give them a little bit of a framework and you say, okay, here's the problem we're trying to solve. We're trying to make this part of our process more efficient. Okay, here's the structure. All right, y'all have an hour. Go figure it out. Let them bang away and learn from each other and, get creative with AI and come up with different solutions. And then at the end of that hour, everybody presents what they came up with. And then everybody votes which one they like the best. Great. We win. Next week, let's go apply that, see if it makes a difference. And then we'll get together at the end of next week. See, did that make a difference? It did. Great. Let's add that to our process. Next thing, what do we want to work on? So it's this constant iterative process, because there's no way that any static process right now is going to survive. There's just none.
Yeah. No, I think we are going to see the $1 billion company that people are talking about, because, like you rightly said, I mean, complete AI native, throw away everything and start with like a base question. But here is another thought. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at a platform called Cluely. Have you heard of this? Okay, you've got to check it out. There was this guy, it's spelled as Clue, as in CLUE and then LY. So this guy was caught cheating at Columbia, I believe, and he built a platform so that he could legally cheat in an interview or a call like this. And the way it works is that an SDR, I mean, he's talking about 3 applications. One, he's saying interviews. Officially, when you asked me a question, on my screen, there will be an invisible layer listening to John. And when John fires a question, my screen would give me a clue which John can't see, even on a screen share. And it's going to tell me how do I respond to John. So I think that's the first wave of the the SDRs, just kind of being a layer in between. And I believe platforms like Cluely are just going to remove the SDR eventually
Yeah,
and
like
then say that, okay, that this.
like that's my point. It's like I don't see, like, that's treating the rep like a robot. Like, okay, great. Here's a clue
Yeah.
that I have no context about. I have no real understanding of who you are or
Yes.
why that clue is relevant to this conversation. But I'm going to regurgitate that clue because this stupid fucking tech told me to. Like, trust me, I've tried. I was like, you know what? Great. Meeting prep. Do it. Automate. Great. Tell me exactly what's the flow of this conversation. What questions should I ask? Right. And so I tried to follow that because I was doing a little experiment with my tier 3 accounts, right? So I was meeting with somebody. And I was like, all right, you know what? Let me see if AI can run this meeting better than I can. Like 3 questions or the flow of this. It felt so robotic. It felt so hollow. There was no engagement. And I just took the question, I threw them away, and I'm like, can we just have a conversation? Now, the problem is that, I'm about to be a 50-year-old man. I went through the grind. I went through the non-tech world. I did the shit work that gave me business acumen, perspective, context, all that stuff, so that I can have this conversation with you. And I don't have something on my screen telling me how to answer your questions that you're asking me right now.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with a 22-year-old kid that just graduated college and grew up in this world of a screen that we're looking at here because of COVID and all that other stuff, they don't have that context. They don't have that business acumen. They don't have that experience. So they're just going to rinse, repeat. They're just going to copy, paste. And in that world, again, I do not understand what the value of the human is.
Yeah. I mean, it's a sad world that we would have, but I think to a lot of people who don't have the suave or the ability to kind of understand human relations, and believe me, one of the toughest things that everybody tells me in sales is to hire the right guy. Every 5 you hire, actually the number's quite even worse here. In some parts of the world, it would be like every 10 guys you hire, one's going to work out. And that's a scary number. I don't know what's your experience. I mean, what's that number for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot we can do now to make that better that companies don't do. Like, I think there's personality assessments. I think there's sales skills assessments. I think there's a lot of intel that we can gather about somebody with AI to tell us not only what kind of, aptitude and coachability and all that stuff do they actually have, but more importantly to me, how they will fit into my team. So I think we've historically done, some personality profile stuff or whatever, but now there's a lot of like literally sales skills assessments that you can take that tell you where your strengths and weaknesses are from a pure sales standpoint, but then married up to what my team looks like. So I actually think right now everybody should go through a sales assessment. Like, I don't pick one. I don't know. There's a billion of them out there, but you should, like, your existing team. If you're looking at your existing team, be like, I don't know if this is the team. Well, before you start firing and hiring random people and all that, literally have everybody on your team take an assessment, a sales skills assessment, and make sure it's the type of assessment that marries up to your business strategy, right? Customer success versus account management versus sales. And you'll find that you might have some great people on your team, but they're just in the wrong roles, right? Like, this kid might be a terrible SDR, but they might be incredible as a customer success person, which is why ultimately, I mean, those tools, but this is ultimately, and this is a systemic, thing for history that I learned early, is that you don't hire on skills. You don't hire on that. You hire on work ethic. You hire on passion. You hire on drive. Those are things you can't teach, right? And so everything else is teachable. Right? I can teach skills, I can teach business acumen, I can teach all these different things, but I can't teach you how to show up. I can't teach you to give a shit, to actually care. And I learned this early in my career when I interviewed Jack Welch, when I actually worked for Jack Welch for a couple of months with his online MBA program. But even before that, when I was like 25 years old and we had started a company, it was like we were 5 people and everybody was super passionate, 10 people and super passionate, 20 people, 30 people. Once we got to like 50, it was like that first person just doesn't seem to have the same drive or passion, right? So I asked that. I went to a conference and Jack Welch, he does like a Q&A, right? And he never presents, he just does a Q&A. So I stood up in front of about, 10,000 people. And I asked what I now know is a dumb question, which is, Jack, you talk a lot about passion, right? And the importance of it and all that other stuff. And I said,
we're about 50 people right now. And it feels just like the 51st person just doesn't have the passion that we do. And I asked the dumb question, which is, how do you instill your passion on somebody else? Like when you hire them? And he goes, in front of about 10,000 people, he told me I was an idiot. Not really, but he said, look, you're looking at it all wrong. You can't instill your passion on somebody else. You got to hire it. And literally in that moment, that changed my entire perspective on hiring. I stopped asking about your background. I stopped giving a shit about your experience. I started caring everything about how can I figure out how driven this person is, how passionate this person is, what their work ethic looks like. Are they coachable? Those are the type of things I started looking for, because all the other stuff I can teach. I can't teach you to be coachable. I can't teach you to be passionate. I can't teach you to be empathetic. Right? So I can't teach you to be curious. So that's what I look for. And that's what I think everybody should look for. And those skills, going back to what's going to be real moving forward, my opinion, IQ is over. IQ is over. It's not even worth trying at this point. EQ is everything. I mean, we are going to be like, again, we go back to training and all this other stuff. We are, whether we consider this a microchip in our head or just some sunglasses that we wear, we are literally it's going to be like the Matrix, where it's going to be like, I just learned Kung Fu. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I want to learn Kung Fu. Tell me how to do Kung Fu. Tell me how to do it my way, because me, glasses, AI thing, whatever it is, my coach, my personal coach who knows everything about me, right? John, I know you're not motivated to do these type of things. So here's how you're going to learn it, step by step. Okay, great, right? So with IQ being just almost a commodity at this point, the EQ factors are going to be the only thing that matters.
Yeah, makes so much sense, man. About Jack Welch. I met him in 2015. Here's this question. So he was so passionate, and he was sitting with Susie, his wife.
Yep.
I mean, and I think she was teaching at Harvard, if I'm not wrong. She
was the editor-in-chief of the Harvard Business Review.
Business Review, yeah. So I'd asked this question. He was 78 or something at that time. Yep. And I asked him a question, how are you so passionate, Jack? This was TiCon, Silicon Valley, 2015. Yep. I remember the date. And he said, well, you've got to get married to someone who's way younger than you. I remember the guy, but I have a book, signed by him. I think that was his last book that he wrote. But yeah, brilliant guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking back on him, he was kind of, unfortunately, if I were to really pin it down, he was probably the peak of capitalism and unfortunately the downfall of the application of capitalism. I think capitalism is great in theory. I think it's horrible in practice. And I think Jack was kind of the pinnacle of that. It was top grading and everything else. I mean, I could justify a lot of the things that he did, but at the end of the day, he kind of bred a lot of greed and showed the world that greed did, not greed, but like exceptionalism, right, was necessary across the board. You could, first or second, or else you're screwed. And I don't know, we don't live in that world, quite frankly, right? Like we have a bunch of average people on this planet. And
You've read Ayn Rand. Have you read Ayn Rand?
No, I haven't read. No.
Oh, well, this is a book that kind of is the epitome or the guiding principle for most of these guys, So this was Jack Welch's favorite, Mark Cuban's favorite. And I mean, you've got to read or look at Fountainhead or Atlas Shrugged, the books that she wrote. But no, I think last 10 minutes, I want to drill down into something, John. And sure. You've literally hit me with so much of powerful stuff, especially about hiring. And I'm so sorry. I want to kind of drill down because I know you have a hard stop. You mentioned hire for EQ. I get that. But when it comes to hiring, it's not an easy thing in that 3 hours, because I mean, that's a smaller company, let's say even a mid-sized company these days does not get the liberty of being a Google where people would do 6 rounds, 7 rounds, right? We don't get that, right? So now what you mentioned, if you could give me your playbook that I could implement today to make sure that I get the right guy in, because it's been one of the biggest failure points, and I'm like happy to accept that. I've hired like possibly 90% not right and maybe 10% right.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm the best person to ask this because I'm in the same boat, right? I thought I did a process where people could go through and I could understand that EQ. And I think it also comes down to, look, everybody ultimately is selfish, right? Everybody ultimately is going to protect themselves, is going to, feed their families. I think as long as you go in with the mentality that, employees are you're going to keep them you can keep the good ones as long as you possibly can, but they're probably going to move on. Right. And so you create an environment where they can learn and such. You'll attract the right ones. But I think the process of the interview process, I think should, in my opinion, start with an assessment, right? Just to see if this person, like for instance, if you're hiring for, a certain
Sales.
yeah,
No.
sales, but
Let's talk
not
about
just
sales.
not just sales, but sales for this manager on this team. Right. So you should know,
Okay.
like, okay, like this manager has this style and therefore, and who's on successful and what does good look like on their team as far as the collaboration, as far as that type of thing. And what does this team need from a personality standpoint? Right. Because I'm, for instance, John Barrows from Boston, Massachusetts, I'm about as direct and in your face as it gets. I'm a high D on the disc scale and those type of things. I would severely disrupt certain teams if you put me on them. Because it's my style. I would probably offend a lot of the people the way I talk. I would, because I have there's no fluff with what I do. If I think something's bullshit, I will call it out. Right. That doesn't work for some teams. Other teams are way more like collaborative. And so I think you have to look at the vibe of the team that you're hiring that person into. And I think an assessment could give you at least
Which one?
I don't know.
Which one do you recommend?
Objective management, OMG. There's one called OMG, objective management, something or other. But not DISC or Myers-Briggs. I'm talking like a sales specific, right? Personality
objective management.
Right?
I mean, I'll look up. And
yeah, it's OMG. I think it's OMG. It's Objective Management Group or something like that.
Okay.
That I've heard, good things about. I would have them go through that first just to see if they even pass that filter, right? And then I would start to, I have a playbook that I have this. Now it comes down to, okay, well, what are the skills and attributes you're looking for, right? Based on this role, what are the skills and attributes that are highest priority for this role, right? Is it communication? Is it written skills? Is it work ethic? Is it, what are those, right? So you kind of force rank all the characteristics that are necessary for said role. Then my approach is I have this, interview document where, say it's a work ethic. Okay. Well, that's a key priority for this role. Well, now let's do a dual interview. Let's have at least two people mid-market. We don't have a lot of resources. But what you want to avoid is like, so tell me about you, and have each person individually interviewing these people and then getting together in the boardroom at the end of the day and be like, so what'd you think? Oh, I like Sarah. She was great because she's really cool. And the person that has the best opinion of said person wins, because whatever, that's a terrible way to do it. So you try to make it as objective as possible. You take the person and you say, okay, if work ethic is a characteristic that we're looking for, what are 2 questions that we can ask? What are 4 questions that we can ask to uncover work ethic, right? Experiential learning, give me an examples of, right? Those type of things. Now, based on those 4 questions, you're going to ask 2 and I'm going to ask 2. And so we and now let's identify, okay, empathy. Empathy is a really critical, right? Customer success, they have to be empathetic, right? Okay, cool. Well, what are 4 questions we can ask that try to uncover empathy? Now, what we do is you ask those 2 questions, right? So we go through this list of the priority tactic, like skills or characteristics necessary, 2 questions each. You interview them, and then I have a scale of 1 to 10. So based on your, what does good look like? What does a good answer look like? We need to know that, right? So before we even ask these questions. And so now I ask you that question if I'm interviewing you, and I then put down a score. Okay, I think you did an 8 out of 10 on that one, a 2 out of 10 on that. I can write my notes down as far as what I think, right? And then somebody else does an interview with you, they rank you on those. So we go through this whole process, and then we add up the scores, basically. And then there's the subjective stuff that you can look for, right? Did they shake your hand when they walked in the door? Did they look at you? Did they look at you in the eye when they answered questions? Did they ask follow-up questions? And what was the quality? So that now you have a great ranking scale of all that too. Yes, 9 out of 10. They looked me in the eye the entire time. Yes, they shook my hand, right? So now you have the objective criteria, and you have an objective way of measuring against every other candidate in there, right? So now at the end of the day, you get down and you take the objective components, bundle those together, and you say, here's our top 3 candidates based on the objective criteria that we put together here. Now let's talk subjectively. Now let's talk about how you felt about that person, what you thought about that person and everything else. And now we can come to a conclusion. Now, is it a perfect thing? No, but it's a nice blend of science and art of trying to go through the process in more than just so tell me about your background. I see you used to work at so-and-so. How is that? Talk to me about one of the biggest challenges you faced in your career. It's like as a sales rep, that better be my best sales job ever.
I'm selling myself. And if you can't sell yourself, you get away from me. I don't even want to, I don't even have you in this conversation. So the question is like, are you selling me here? Right? Or do you have real answers? And so that's why we have to cut through that fluff of those bullshit questions. You know, people ask hypothetical questions like in interviews. Like, are you kidding me? I could get hired for any job on the planet if you ask me a hypothetical question, because I know what you're looking for. I know what you're trying. I know why you're asking me that question. So I'm going to be like, oh, you want to ask situational based questions. So instead of saying, John, something like, hey, John, what would you do if you got in an argument with your manager? How would you approach it? Right? I'd be like, oh, well, you know, I'd sit back. I'd think about why I was a little upset. I'd ask my manager to spend some time off the office. I'd come up with my questions because I'm not always just a problem person. I'm a solution person, right? And I would sit down with them and you're going to be like, holy shit, this kid is incredible. Versus situational based. John, give me an example of the last time you got in an argument with your manager and how did you approach it and what was the result? That's hard. That's really hard to lie about right on the fly, right? So it's like, because now I got to think. It's like, all right, and me giving you that example is going to tell you far more than me giving you a hypothetical answer to some question that is, I know where you're trying to get from it.
Yeah, no, this is gold, man. Like you've given so many amazing insights and ideas. You know, this is a top skill for this year that I have on my list, how to hire people right and, you know, make sure. What you just said, you mix two approaches that I've come across. One is this interrogator from FBI where, you know, because FBI has Chris Voss on masterclass. I think that's the guy, you know, and he talks about this, how FBI would ask questions that are situational and you don't even know you're giving away information, right? I mean, yeah, so
he's a little bit. I mean, he's an FBI negotiator for terrorists. So there's a little. I love his stuff. Don't get me wrong. There's some really gold in there, but we're talking sales here. We don't solve cure. You know, we don't kill people. We don't solve world cancer or anything like that. So I think if there's a little bit to be like, okay, right?
Yeah, no, but the part where you know you can't pretend. I mean, there are questions like you gave a fantastic idea here about that situational question. You know, I learned another one like this where it was like, who's your role model? Why do you think that guy is your role model? And there are ways where it's super tough for someone to pretend or to make up an answer because they can't cook that up right away, right? I mean, there are things like I had a guy for a design interview and I could smell marijuana or something that he was smoking, weed or something. And you know, the way I approached the situation, I was like, hey man, do you take weed? I was acting as if I take it, right? I didn't. Right. And he was so excited to offer it to me. Would you believe? And he's like, yeah, you want some?
Yep.
And you know, that kind of stuff. I know we're coming up to a hard stop now. The second part you did brilliantly. I mean, some great suggestions. There is the Edward de Bono 6-hat thinkings, where you just mentioned that, you know, first think about the objective and then wear the subjective hat. So I love that. And I think this has been a fantastic episode. And I would, you know, like really thank you and for sharing all these, not holding anything. And, you know, I hope we can do this again, John, but, you know, I know you have a hard stop. Thank you so much for joining us. And I have one last quick one-liner that you could give. What's one suggestion to people who are sales leaders or founders who are just trying to accelerate? One suggestion that you think is they can't neglect. And if you had just one thing to say to someone, what would that be?
Give a shit.
Empathy.
Give a shit. If you care, it's the one thing that AI can't do. It can pretend to care, but fundamentally it can't. So if you give a shit about your career, if you give a shit about like, here's real quick, you know, rep came to me one time and said, John, you know, I'm doing all these cadence things and I'm just not getting the results, right? And he's like, what am I supposed to do, right? What can I do different? And I said, well, nothing's going to change until one thing does. And he said, what? And I said, until you start giving a shit, until you start caring about that person that you're reaching out to and stop treating them like an email to send or a cadence to hit or a call to make. And you start thinking of them as a person who wakes up in the fucking morning, has problems just like you and me, has a boss yelling at them, you know, genuinely thinks about, can I help this person? Nothing's going to change. And so I think if there's one thing I would suggest anybody do, is figure out a way to actually give a shit about what you're selling. Because if you don't care about what you're selling, you're just another douchebag sales rep that's just trying to get a commission check and you're the one giving us a bad reputation. But if you genuinely care about and believe that what you sell makes a difference to the right person, that transfer of enthusiasm comes through. So I would say give a shit.
Wow. Thank you so much, man. This has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing all this. It's been such a pleasure and truckloads of learning for me. So
Yeah, appreciate it. And if anybody wants to learn more, by the way, my website has everything, right? So jbarrows.com, jbarrows.com. That's where you can find, my YouTube channel with a ton of free shit, my membership that has all my content in it that, again, is the relevance of it, I think, is I just redid it to kind of meet the moment right now. And then, and I got a one-on-one mentorship that I'm putting out there just starting. So if anybody's interested, they just ping me on that and I'm happy to help.
wow, I think it's going to be a game changer. I'm going to look at that myself, and I hope to kind of engage in a conversation soon. But thank you so much, and see you next time.
Awesome, man. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Thanks. Bye.